Ionic has a couple of design elements for mobile applications that are called cards or inset lists. They are really just lists in disguise with a few classes added to them, but they have a slightly different look and feel. So let's take a look at what it would take to add those into our application. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything inside Ion content so that I can start from scratch. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and create a div with a class of list and also list inset. And then inside that, I'm going to create another div with a class of item, just like we did for lists, and just put something in there. So just some lorem ipsum text. And if I save that, you can see that inset lists are just like lists, but they have a little bit of padding around them as well as a border. Now, cards are exactly like inset lists. So if you modify this div right here to just say card, you're going to get the same thing, except that it has a little bit of a drop shadow. Since inset lists do not have shadows, they are considered to be a little bit faster. So I'm just going to stick right now with inset lists and get rid of the shadow. The new design thing is to be flat anyways. Cards can also have dividers which act as the header and footer of the cards. So they're pretty much like what you would do with a list. You can just add a class of item and item divider, and then whatever you put in here becomes the header for the list. So it has a slightly different style. And of course, if you wanted to do a footer, you don't actually have a separate class. You just kind of put this same item and item divider div, and then we'll just type in footer here, but it's pretty much the same thing. So if you want a footer, you just add one of these item dividers, just like we did with lists. So cards, lists, and inset lists share some of the same type of components, so they can have avatars, thumbnails, and icons like lists. So let's go ahead and add an icon here. We'll add an eye, and we'll give it a class of icon and also ion home. This is the home icon. And whenever we add an icon to any list, we also need to add an item icon left or an item icon right to make sure that it formats properly and it's also the same size. So list elements by default will automatically crop and have these three little dots that you see on the side. If you want to see the rest of the text, what you can do is add another class right here called item text wrap. And now you can see the entire text that you typed in this section. You can also create an item that is an image. So let's add another item. It'll go right before this other div. So we'll do another item, and this one will have another class called item image. And we'll just add an image tag right there. We'll use the website placehold.it to just mock up an image. And I'm going to save that. So you can see that by default, the images take up the entire width and height of the element, which looks pretty cool. Now, if you want some padding around the image, then you can add the item body class, and that will give you a little bit of padding around the image. If you add some text to that, so let's go ahead and add another, let's do a paragraph with some lorem ipsum text there. And you can see that by default, the text will center on the bottom of these images. And as long as you have item body, it'll do the proper amount of padding around that image. Now notice that normally to show the entire text of an element, we would have to add the item text wrap. But whenever we're using item body, we don't have to do that. So as I mentioned, inset lists and cards are really just lists in disguise. I'm not really crazy about the drop shadows, so I usually stick with inset lists. Now remember that these are also related to the Ion list Angular directives, which you can find by going to the JavaScript section of the documentation and then looking under lists. So whenever I do a div with a class of list, you can just really replace that with an Ion list tag, and any sort of list item can be replaced with the Ion item.